They put a bag over my head for the shuttle ride up, which I thought was generous of them. It meant they were still afraid of what I might see. When they pulled it off, I was standing in a corridor that smelled of mineral oil and something astringent I couldn't name. A cleaning compound, I thought, or an atmosphere additive for the recycled air. The Keth-Soraan running their ships slightly drier than standard compact atmospheric baseline. The walls were pale amber, curved slightly inward the way Keth-Soraan interior architecture always curved, as if every passage were the inside of a throat. Not an aggressive design choice. I had spent enough time in Dominion spaces during the compact's operational years to understand it was structural, not symbolic, related to the way their internal pressure systems worked. It still felt like being swallowed, probably by design. I noted the corridor length, long enough to turn 3 times without seeing the end in either direction. I noted the ceiling height, low enough that a human could touch it by reaching up, which most of my colleagues would have found oppressive. I found it useful to note. I noted the 2 guards flanking me, both judiciary cast by the pale gold striping on their collars, 4 arms each, the lower pair folded tight against their torsos in what I'd learned was a posture of professional neutrality. Not relaxed, Keth-Soraan judiciary cast didn't relax on duty. Their neutral posture was still precise, still positioned, but not aggressive either. They were there to convey, not to intimidate. The intimidation was for later. I noted the slight hum of propulsion through the deck plating beneath my boots, not the steady low-register vibration of an orbital station, which would have been slightly different in frequency, more distributed. This was thrusters, ship thrusters, drive systems at low burn maintaining a position against the gravity well below. Not a station then, a ship, a large one given the scale of the hum, moving slowly but deliberately, which meant it was maintaining a specific position, a formation position. I noted the time on the small chrono sewn into the inner lining of my left sleeve, which they had not found because they had not found the sleeve. The sleeve had its own internal pocket, a mod I'd made myself with a folded strip of equipment liner, and the chrono was the smallest Model 7th Expeditionary issued, roughly the size of my thumbnail. They had gone through my other pockets twice, during the initial capture and again before they put me on the shuttle. They had not gone through the sleeve. 42 minutes. My name is Corporal Yeva Strand, 7th Expeditionary, Deathworld Classification Pellas 9. I had been a prisoner of the Keth-Soraan Dominion for 11 days. In that time I had been questioned 4 times in a standard holding cell aboard a smaller vessel, a frigate, by the engine noise, and I had given them my name and my classification and nothing else, which is all the compact requires of a prisoner in good standing, and which is all I intended to give. The questioning had not been pleasant. I don't intend to describe it here. What I will say is that by the end of the 4th session, the lead questioner, a junior assessor with 3 of his 4 arms, who had been professional in the way that people are professional when they are following a procedure they find distasteful, had stood, gathered his data slates, and said, in the flat translation band cadence I'd come to recognize, that he was going to recommend escalation. I had thanked him. He had blinked at that with all 4 of his amber eyes, which were set in a face like carved pale stone, and then he had left. I did not know what escalation meant for them. I had a theory. The theory had arrived in the form of a signal my handler had managed to slip through the frigate's comm suppression 11 days ago, 3 minutes before my capture, which is why I had allowed myself to be captured. The signal was 12 characters encrypted, and when decoded it read, fold in 4200 from capture plus 11 days. MY estimate only. Hold them. Hold them, that was the order. 11 days plus 42 minutes from now. I had been counting since the moment the signal arrived. The corridor ended in a large pressure door, pale amber like everything else, with Keth-Soraan script above the frame that I could read well enough to understand. It said Tribunal Gallery, Restricted. The guards stopped. One of them pressed a 4-fingered hand to a reader beside the door, and the door irised open with a sound like a slow exhale. The room beyond was large. Not ceremonially large the way their groundside council chambers were large. I had been in one of those before the war during the compact negotiations, and the ceilings had been 40 meters of carved obsidian inlaid with the Dominion's 62 territorial seals, and every visible surface had been some variety of pale gold or dark inlay, calibrated to project the weight of centuries. This room was not that. This room was functionally large. The ceiling was glass, a full dome, polarized to cut the worst of the star glare but clear enough to show the planet below, a gas giant, banded in ochre and rust, its upper atmosphere catching the local star's light at the angle of mid-morning if you were standing on a planet's surface and wanted to use that frame of reference, which I did, because it helped to orient myself in spaces designed to disorient. The floor was dark composite, the kind that didn't show scuffs and didn't register boot sounds well, sound dampened, another deliberate choice. In Keth-Soraan judicial proceedings, ambient noise was considered prejudicial to the formal record. Their courts had been acoustically managed for centuries before they'd ever met a species capable of attending one. The effect was a particular quality of stillness, every voice emerging from it with unusual clarity, nothing blurred by ambient echo. My footsteps were swallowed as I crossed from the door to the center of the room. The guard's 4-footed gait was similarly absorbed. Only our voices would carry here. Around the room's perimeter at a raised gallery level accessed by a swept curve of pale-amber steps stood an audience. 12 Keth-Soraan, all judiciary caste, all in the pale gold of their rank, all four-armed. They were watching me. Not with aggression, with the particular quality of Keth-Soraan attention that I had come to think of as assessment, the way a very good diagnostician looks at a patient, not with hostility but with a kind of thorough taking in. I looked back at them without expression. Several of them registered that, the inner pair of eyes tracking slightly, the way the inner pair always moved when something surprised them or required reprocessing. In the center of the room, behind a curved desk of pale stone, sat one more. He was larger than the others. Not much. Keth-Soraan scholarly elite don't run to physical size the way their warrior castes do, and the scholarly elite in particular were often smaller than the species average, the selection pressure for their caste running toward the kind of attention and precision that didn't require physical bulk. But there was something in his bearing that added to him. He held himself with the particular stillness of someone who had long ago stopped needing to signal authority through movement. Authority was already present. Movement would only have diluted it. He had the same carved pale stone face as the others, the same 4 amber eyes, the inner pair a slightly lighter amber than the outer pair, which was a marker of Keth-Soraan judicial rank I had read about but not previously observed in person. The same 4 arms, the lower 2 resting flat on the desk in front of him, the upper 2 folded behind his back in a posture I recognized from the compact negotiations as one of formal preparedness. He wore no rank striping. He didn't need to. The others in the gallery were watching him the way you watch a wall you've built your house against. He said, in translation band standard that was noticeably cleaner than the junior assessors had been, less accent residue, fewer cadence artifacts, the kind of fluency that came from years of direct use rather than machine assistance. Corporal Yeva Strand, 7th Expeditionary, classification Pella's 9. That's right, I said. I am Arbiter-Primus Ve Loreth of the Dominion Tribunal. I have authority to accept surrender, ratify capitulation, and bind species-level agreements under the Dominion's compact of hostilities. I know what an Arbiter-Primus is, I said. He regarded me for a moment with all 4 eyes, which meant the inner pair, smaller and set slightly forward of the outer pair, swiveled to join the outer pair's line of sight. It made his gaze feel crowded, full. The Keth-Soraan full attention look. I had been looked at with it throughout my 11 days of questioning, but those looks had been from junior assessors working through a procedure they had been given. This was different. This was the full attention of someone who had developed it over a career of proceedings, and who was using it now with the deliberate intent of a tool. Then you understand the function of this proceeding, he said. I understand what you'd like it to be, I said. Whether that's what it is, I haven't decided. Something moved across his face. Not offense, he was too composed for that, more like calibration. Like a man revising a small number downward and finding the new number doesn't change the calculation. You are the senior-ranking prisoner in Dominion custody, he said. There are currently 11 other compact-designated combatants held across 3 Dominion facilities. Their continued status as prisoners in good standing depends on your cooperation with this proceeding. I said, that's not how the compact works. The compact, he said, is a document negotiated under circumstances that have materially changed. The compact is the compact, I said. The circumstances don't change the document. That's what a document is for. He looked at me. Do you want to sit down? No, I said. Thank you. I was standing in the center of the room, wrists bound in front of me with a Keth-Soraan detention strap, a single piece of material that tightened when stressed and loosened when relaxed, which was a clever design and one I had spent considerable time in the last 11 days studying. My boots were on my feet. My uniform was the same one I'd been wearing since capture, cleaned once by the frigate's processing unit. My hair was short enough that 11 days made no real difference. I was calm. I was not pretending to be calm. 41 minutes. Very well, Valorith said. He picked up a data slate with one of his upper hands and set it flat on the desk in front of him. I will explain what is going to happen. The Dominion Tribunal has already issued a finding of accountability against the 7th Expeditionary for the engagement at Thresh-Median Station. The finding is sealed. What remains is the consequential proceeding, the determination of species-level obligation, which is to say, what Earth owes the Dominion for the engagement. Earth owes the Dominion nothing for Thresh-Median, I said. The station was in contested space. We were operating under compact rules of engagement. Your task force fired first. The tribunal's finding is sealed, he said again, as if I hadn't spoken. I mention it not to debate it, but because I want you to understand where we are in the sequence. The finding exists. The consequence remains to be determined. That determination is why you are here. All right, I said. He waited as if he expected more. When I didn't provide it, he set the data slate down with a careful precision that told me he was a man who placed things carefully. Everything about him was placed carefully. The hands on the desk, the angle of his chair, the spacing between the data slate and the edge of the stone surface. Not nervous precision, practiced precision. The precision of someone for whom controlling the arrangement of the immediate environment was a professional habit, so deeply embedded it was now simply character. The Dominion is prepared to accept a limited species-level capitulation, he said. Not a surrender of territory, not a suspension of hostilities across all theaters. A formal acknowledgement, logged, sealed, compact certified, that the 7th Expeditionary acted outside sanctioned parameters at Thresh-Median. In exchange, the 11 prisoners in Dominion custody would be returned to compact processing, their status restored. Hostilities in the Thresh-Median corridor would be suspended for a period of 60 days, during which time formal negotiations could proceed. I looked at him. You want me to sign a false accounting? I want you to sign a compact certified acknowledgement of something that didn't happen. Of the tribunal's sealed finding, he said. The finding is what it is. Your signature does not determine its truth. It determines the next step. 39 minutes. I thought about Thresh-Median. I had been there. Third position in a 4-shuttle escort, watching a Keth-Soraan task force move through a transit corridor that both species had an equal right to use. Their lead vessel had lit targeting systems on us, not fired, lit them up, the active scan of a weapon being aimed. Our escort lead, Lieutenant Commander Harrow, had returned the gesture. 4 seconds of that exchange and then their second vessel had fired. Not a warning shot, a real one. Harrow's shuttle had lost its portside drive array and tumbled into a debris field, and we had spent the next 14 hours pulling it out and patching it together enough to make transit, while the Keth-Soraan task force sat at a respectful distance and waited, because even they understood that killing a drifting shuttle was a step further than they wanted to go that day. Nobody aboard our escort had died. The Keth-Soraan had withdrawn and filed their accounting first, which was how they'd gotten a tribunal finding before we'd finished writing our own incident report. Their filing was accurate in the way that selective accounting can be accurate. Every fact it contained was a real fact, and the facts it omitted were the facts that would have changed the picture. That's the thing about Keth-Soraan judiciary cast that the compact negotiators had taken 3 years to fully understand. They weren't liars. They were editors. The document that Vayloreth wanted me to sign was, in their framework, not a false document. It was an incomplete document that had been formally sealed and thereby made complete. That was how the tribunal system worked. A sealed finding was complete by definition, and what the compact signatories who had drafted the hostilities clause had not understood, because it had not been explained to them clearly enough, was that the Keth-Soraan concept of documentary completeness was not the same as the human concept of factual accuracy. "No," I said. Vayloreth set his lower 2 hands flat on the desk. It was a gesture I recognized from the compact negotiations, a Keth-Soraan posture of finality, of a position being set. "Corporal Strand," he said, "I want you to consider carefully what you are refusing." "I have," I said. "The answer is no." "The 11 prisoners are protected by the compact regardless of what I do in this room," I said. "If you harm them in retaliation for my refusal, you breach the compact yourselves, and every member species has grounds for collective action. You know that. You're an Arbiter-Primus." He looked at me for a long time. "You are very sure of the compact's weight," he said. "I know what it says." "Documents," he said, "say what they say until circumstances make them impractical." "Then you'd better hope circumstances don't change," I said, which was the closest I came in that room to laughing. He did not know what I meant. He would, but not yet. 37 minutes. He stood. When a Keth-Soraan judicial cast member stood, all 4 arms came into play, the lower pair rising from the desk to hang at his sides, the upper pair clasping briefly behind his back. It was a display posture. They were slightly longer than human arms relative to body proportion, and when extended they added considerably to his apparent size. He was using them deliberately. "Let me show you something," he said. He moved to a panel on the wall behind him. The same pale amber as everything else, seamlessly integrated so that you wouldn't notice the seam until the hand found the reader, and pressed his upper right hand against it. The panel slid back to reveal a viewport. Not the dome above us, a side viewport, facing outward from the ship, looking out across the transit zone at an angle that showed open space and the gas giant's limb, and between them the dark shapes of ships. Keth-Soraan warships. 3 of them at immediate view, their hulls catching the local star's light at the angles of their current orientations, each one a slightly different shade of dark as a result. One catching full sun glare on its ventral surface, one showing only the dark shadow of its dorsal hull, one in between. Beyond those 3 more. The formation was dense enough that the further vessels resolved as shapes against the ochre of the gas giant rather than distinct hulls. They were close enough together that the formation read as a wall. 12 vessels, Vayloreth said, Judiciary-class escort, each carrying 8 interdiction-weight hardpoints. They are positioned in a standard tribunal security formation. Nothing moves through this transit zone without tribunal authorization. He turned from the viewport. "Your fleet knows where you are." "My fleet knows where I was captured," I said. "Then your fleet knows where this ship is operating," he said. "And your fleet has not moved. 11 days, no response fleet, no diplomatic contact through official channels." He tilted his head. "Do you know what I conclude from that?" Tell me, I said. That Earth is afraid, he said. That your government understands the tribunal's finding gives the Dominion a compact certified cause for escalation, and they are calculating whether they can afford the engagement that would follow. His 4 eyes held mine. I do not think they can, and I think you know they cannot. Which is why you are here rather than a diplomat, because they could not send a diplomat without implicitly acknowledging the tribunal's jurisdiction, but they cannot afford to leave their prisoner unaddressed. So they left you here alone, and they are hoping the tribunal finds something less than full escalation acceptable. He paused. Which, as it happens, we do. I looked at the viewport. I looked at his ships. Can I get some water? I said. He blinked the full 4-eye sequence, a blink that moved from inner to outer in the Keth-Soraan order, which meant the question had genuinely surprised him rather than merely been unexpected. A tactical surprise and a genuine surprise produced different blink sequences. The junior assessors on the frigate had produced a lot of the former and very little of the latter. This was the latter. Water. I haven't had water since this morning, I said. I'm not going to be more cooperative if I'm dehydrated. Another long pause. He looked at the 2 guards by the door, said something in Dominion primary speech that the translation band didn't catch. A short statement, a few syllables, the cadence of an instruction rather than a question, and one of them moved to a panel near the door. There was a brief wait, perhaps 20 seconds, during which Loreth and I and the 12 gallery members all occupied the same soundless room. Then the guard returned with a container cylindrical, their standard hydration vessel, sealed at the top with a membrane cap, a drinking aperture on the side. He placed it on the desk in front of where I was standing. He did not meet my eyes. The guards, in my experience, never met my eyes. The Arbiter-Primus did, consistently. That was the difference between a guard and an Arbiter-Primus. I picked it up with both hands. The detention strap made individual grip impossible, so I used both together and drank. The water was filtered clean and tasted of nothing, the way good water tastes. Not minerally, not treated, just water. Someone aboard this ship ran a good filtration system, which was the kind of detail that told you something about how the ship was maintained and by extension about how the crew thought about their work. I drank a third of it slowly and set it down. 34 minutes. Corporal Strand, Loreth said, with the deliberate cadence of a man returning to a point he had not finished making. I want to explain the alternative to your cooperation. All right, I said. The tribunal's sealed finding authorizes the Dominion to designate the 7th Expeditionary as a non-compact combatant entity. That designation removes your 11 colleagues from prisoner in good standing protection. It also authorizes the Dominion to move against 7th Expeditionary assets in the Thresh Median Corridor with full military force, without compact restraint. He paused. At this point, the Dominion's patience with this particular zone of engagement has come to an end. We are prepared to move. What we are also prepared to do, which is why this tribunal proceeding exists, is allow Earth a structured exit from this engagement that costs you less than the alternative. The alternative being you attack, I said. The alternative being the Dominion exercises its compact certified right to respond to a catalogued act of aggression with measured force. Yes. I looked at him. The 12 vessels in the viewport, the audience in the gallery, watching with their 4-eyed Keth-Soraan attention. The dome above us, the gas giant below, the stars' light slanting through from the upper left of the dome and landing on the pale stone desk in a sharp-edged trapezoid. I want to ask you something, I said. Ask. How long has this ship been in position, in this formation, in this transit zone? He didn't hesitate. Arbiter-Primus wouldn't. Hesitation would be beneath him. 12 days, he said. We anticipated the tribunal's finding would require a proceeding of this nature. 12 days, I said. That's a long time to hold a formation in place. Dominion vessels are capable of sustained operational deployment, he said. Sure, I said. I'm not questioning the ships, I'm asking about the crews. I picked up the water container and took another drink. My experience with sustained formation deployment is that by day 12, the crew's attention is good on paper and actually pretty diffuse. They've been doing the same watch rotations for 12 days. They've been looking at the same viewport. They've been expecting something that hasn't come. That's not a criticism. It's what happens to every crew after 12 days of nothing. Their nervous systems have recalibrated to a baseline that says nothing is coming. Valoreth was very still. The point of this observation. Just making conversation, I said. 29 minutes. He let the silence sit for a moment, then walked back to his desk and sat. His lower hands went flat again. He picked up the data slate with his upper left hand. Let me be direct, Corporal Strand. I have been direct throughout this proceeding, and I will continue to be. You are one person. You are unarmed. You are the only Pella's 9 classification prisoner in Dominion custody. The others are lower classifications. And while I respect the Compact's protection of all combatants, I want you to understand that the leverage in this room is not evenly distributed. I understand that, I said. Then you understand that your government has placed you here, held you here for 11 days and has not moved. Not a fleet probe. Not a negotiating contact through any official channel. Whatever signal you may have received or hope to receive or believe you have received. He set down the slate. No fleet is coming, Corporal Strand. Earth is calculating. And while they calculate, the Dominion's patience has a remaining duration. He waited. I said, may I sit down now? He looked at me. You said you preferred to stand. I changed my mind, I said. I've been standing since they pulled the bag off. My legs are fine. I'm not asking because they're not fine. I'm asking because I'd like to sit, and you asked me earlier and I said no, and now I'm saying yes. Valoreth studied me for a moment, all 4 eyes, the particular quality of Keth-Soraan attention that always felt like being analyzed rather than looked at, and then gestured to his left. One of the guards brought a low bench and set it where I was standing. I sat. I put the water container on my knee. Thank you, I said. He said nothing. 26 minutes. My government hasn't been calculating, I said. That's not what the silence is. Then what is it? Patience, I said. We're a patient species. It's one of the things that surprised me when I was young, learning about the other compact signatories, how differently species experience time. The Keth-Soraan experience duration, I think, as something that accumulates. Time accumulates, decisions accumulate, debts accumulate. The longer something waits, the heavier it becomes. He was listening. I kept going. Humans don't experience it that way. For us, time is more like a field, flat. The same amount of time can feel long or short depending on what we're doing, but it doesn't accumulate weight. 11 days waiting feels to a human like 11 days. It doesn't feel like pressure. It doesn't feel like accumulating obligation. I looked at him. When I was a child, I grew up on Pella's 9, which I assume you know. We used to have to wait out the storm seasons. The big ones could run for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of being inside, doing what you could do inside, and then going out again when it was over. 6 weeks isn't long. It's just 6 weeks. You are comparing your captivity to a weather event, Valoreth said. No, I said, I'm explaining how I experience duration. I looked down at the water container, then up at the dome. The gas giant had shifted slightly. The ship was maintaining a slow orbital trace, the planet's banded surface scrolling in the lower half of the dome's view. The storm ends, I said, and then you go out. You don't feel the weight of it, you just go out. 22 minutes. He was quiet for a moment. I had said something he was actually considering, which was different from the pattern the rest of the proceeding had followed. He had been considering my refusals throughout, processing them, adjusting his approach, but that was tactical consideration. This was different. The way he went quiet was the way a person goes quiet when something lands in a different category than they'd placed it. Corporal Strand, he said, I have conducted 47 tribunal proceedings. Many of them have involved difficult counterparties. I want to tell you, because I think it is due to you, you are the most composed prisoner of record I have encountered in those 47 proceedings. Thank you, I said. It is not a compliment in the way you may be taking it, he said. Composed prisoners are not the difficult cases. Composed prisoners have concluded something, and they are waiting for that conclusion to arrive. The difficulty in such cases is that the conclusion they are waiting for is rarely the one that arrives. He looked at me steadily. Nothing is coming. The longer you wait in that composure, the harder the re-entry into the actual situation will be. I looked at him. I thought about Arbiter-Primus ve Loreth, 47 proceedings, 47 counterparties. I thought about what it took to do that job well. Not cruelty. He wasn't cruel, which surprised me a little, though it shouldn't have. Cruelty is for people who are afraid of losing and fear that what they're doing might not be enough and compensate by doing more of it harder. Ve Loreth wasn't afraid of losing. He was afraid of nothing in this room, and that was because he understood the room completely, the same way a person understands a room they've been in 47 times. He knew every angle. He knew every position the counterparty could take. He knew how the desperation looked, the different gradations of it, from early defiance through middle period calculation to the late-stage acknowledgement that the situation was what it was. He'd seen all of it. He'd watched people arrive at every different point on that arc, and he'd learned how to read where each person was on the arc at any given moment. He'd misread me, not because he was bad at his job, because the arc he was looking for assumed the counterparty's information matched his. The arc he knew, the desperation gradations, the transitions between them, all of it assumed that the counterparty understood the situation as well as he did, and that the gap between what they wanted and what was possible would close over time, and that composure in the face of that gap was a kind of defiance that couldn't last because defiance exhausts itself. He hadn't seen this, not because I was exceptional, because the counterparty's information in this instance was actually different from his and not in a way that defiance could explain. Defiance says, I refuse to accept the situation. What I was doing said something else. It said, I understand the situation completely and you don't have all of it yet. He couldn't read that. It didn't fit the arc. It would eventually. But not yet. You might be right, I said. I've been wrong before. He studied that answer. Have you? Twice, I said. That I know of, probably more that I don't. You develop a feeling for it after a while, the particular quality of being wrong. It has a texture. What texture? Like stepping on ground you expected to be solid and finding it isn't, I said. That half second where your body has already committed but your mind is catching up. I looked at the dome. I don't feel that right now. 19 minutes. Ve Loreth folded his upper hands together on the desk. It was another posture from the compact negotiations, a posture of recollection, of drawing on precedent. I had seen it before. Let me ask you a question, he said. All right. If we proceed without your agreement, if the tribunal issues its consequential finding without your signature, and the Dominion moves against 7th Expeditionary assets in the corridor, what does that cost you personally? Nothing irreversible, I said. No, he said. What does it cost you not operationally, as a person? I thought about that. My colleagues in the corridor, I said, if they get hit, that costs me. Then your composure is costing them, he said. Every minute you hold this position, you are making a calculation about what your patience is worth against what it might cost the people in that corridor. I looked at him. You're going to tell me I'm not worth what I think I am. I'm going to tell you that you are one person, he said, and that the people in that corridor are real, and that whatever you are waiting for, it has a cost attached to it. You're right, I said, it does. He waited. It's a cost I can carry, I said. The silence after that was different from the silences before it. The audience in the gallery had not moved. They'd been still throughout, the professional stillness of judicial observers, trained to show nothing. But something had shifted in the room. Loreth looked at me and then looked down at his data slate and then looked up at the dome, which was the first time in the entire proceeding that he had looked somewhere other than at me or at something on the desk. It was a brief look. He brought it back. 16 minutes. Corporal Strand, he said, I am going to make this simple. I am going to read you the text of the acknowledgement document. You are going to listen. And then I am going to ask you once more whether you will sign it. Whatever your answer is, that will be the conclusion of this proceeding, and the tribunal will issue its consequential finding within the hour. All right, I said. He picked up the data slate and read. The text was in translation band standard, and it was approximately what he described. A compact certified acknowledgement that the 7th Expeditionary had operated outside sanctioned parameters at Thresh Median Station, that the Keth-Soraan task force had responded within compact rules of engagement, and that Earth acknowledged the legitimacy of the tribunal's jurisdiction over the incident. Signing it wouldn't end the war. It wasn't designed to. It was designed to give the Dominion a clean, compact, certified precedent for the next move. A document that said we agreed we'd been wrong once would travel well in the formal record. It would show up in every subsequent negotiation. It would become the ground the next argument stood on. He finished reading and set the slate down. No, I said. He was very still for a moment. Then he stood again, the display posture, the 4 arms extending slightly. Behind him, through the viewport, the formation of 12 vessels was still visible against the gas giant's banded surface. You understand what you are choosing, he said. I understand what I'm choosing, I said. 12 minutes. Then this proceeding is at its conclusion, he said. The tribunal will issue. The alarm was not loud. It was a tone, a single clean tone that repeated 3 times from speakers I couldn't see, followed by a second tone at a slightly lower pitch. The kind of alert system designed to be heard without being panicking. The Keth-Soraan judiciary cast in the gallery above us shifted, for the first time in the proceeding. Not dramatically. Just shifted, the way a room shifts when something enters it. Loreth did not look at the viewport immediately. He looked at me. I looked back at him. Then he turned to the viewport. 10 minutes. It was not the first fold emergence I had ever seen from outside a human ship. I had been on an alien vessel during one once, during a joint patrol exercise, early in the Compact's operational period, before the war, and I knew what it looked like from the outside. The distortion wave arrived first, a ripple in the surrounding space that was visible to any sensor system sophisticated enough to read it. Then the ships themselves, pushing through the fold boundary the way something emerges from water, the leading edges materializing, then the full hull, then the drive systems. The emergence took between 4 and 8 seconds per vessel, depending on mass. 12 vessels had taken the Dominion 12 days to assemble into a formation. What emerged in the next 8 minutes from the fold boundaries, surrounding the transit zone, was not 12 vessels. I knew the fleet's composition. I had been briefed before capture, that was part of the plan, so I know what I was waiting for. 27 vessels in 3 groups. The largest group was 4 carrier-class ships, each carrying 48 auxiliary craft. The second group was 9 destroyer-weight ships, fast and hard-keeled, built for the exact kind of interdiction formation the Keth-Soraan had set up. The third group was 14 escort-weight vessels, smaller and faster, their function not combat but position, filling the gaps, preventing fold-out, ensuring that once the Keth-Soraan formation was inside the ring, it stayed inside the ring. I watched the formation appear in the dome above us. Not just in the viewport, the dome showed the full sphere of space around the ship, and when I tilted my head up, I could see the fold distortions arriving from 4 separate points, each group emerging in sequence the way coordinated fold transit worked. the timing staggered by seconds to prevent interference between boundary events. The Keth-Soraan alarm system produced a third tone, a fourth. A different pitch from the first four, which I recognized from a Dominion technical briefing I had attended 3 years ago as the combat readiness alert, not the standard tactical alert. The full combat readiness signal, the one that meant all hardpoints live, all hands to position, all internal seals closed. Ve-Loreth was at the viewport. He stood there looking out. His 4 arms were at his sides, the lower pair absolutely still, the upper pair clasped briefly behind his back and then brought forward again, a gesture I had not seen from him before in this proceeding, which meant it wasn't a formal posture. It was just what his body was doing. 7 minutes. I drank the last of the water. He turned from the viewport. His face was still composed. He was an Arbiter-Primus 47 proceedings, a face that had learned long ago not to show the calculation happening behind it. But he was looking at me differently than he had looked at me at any point in the proceeding, not with the analyzing quality of his full 4-eye attention, with something else. "How long?" he said. "Since before you put the bag over my head," I said. He was still for a moment. The proceeding, the questions, the water. He said it flatly, inventorying. "Yes," I said. "You were buying time." "I was doing what my job required," I said. 5 minutes. He came back to the desk. He did not sit. He stood behind it, all 4 hands now resting on the stone surface, and he looked at the dome, and then at the viewport, and then at me. In the gallery above us, the 12 audience members were no longer still. They were standing, some of them at the viewport windows, some of them at their communications panels along the gallery wall. "The formation," Ve-Loreth said, not to me specifically, to the room. "We are positioned." One of the gallery members, an older Keth-Soraan, gray-scaled at the temples, upper arms marked with the same pale gold but more of it, a senior assessor or a fleet liaison, said, in Dominion primary speech, "They are outside engagement range." "If we move to engage," Ve-Loreth said, in standard, presumably for my benefit, "they are outside engagement range." "For now," I said. He looked at me. "What is the purpose of this fleet?" "Deterrence," I said. "That's what they'll say in the official communication, which you'll receive within the next few minutes. The communication will indicate that the 7th Expeditionary has registered the Dominion's tribunal proceeding and disputes the finding, and that Earth is exercising its compact right to position forces in contested space while the dispute is formally processed. The communication will be polite. It will not threaten." He looked at the dome. The fold emergences were complete, 27 vessels now visible in the sphere of space around us, spread across the transit zone at positions I recognized as a standard encirclement formation, not an attack formation, a position. "They cannot hold this position indefinitely," he said. "No," I said, "neither can you." 3 minutes. He turned to look at me, all 4 eyes, the full attention. "What is it that you want, Corporal Strand?" "Me personally," I said. "I want to go home. I've been in this corridor for 7 months. I'd like a long shower and a hot meal and about 4 days horizontal." I looked at the dome. "What Earth wants is for the Dominion to acknowledge that Thresh Median was a mutual responsibility event and agree to a joint review. There's no acknowledgement of fault. There's no sealed finding. There's a joint review, and then there's a determination made by both parties together, and then there's a proceeding if needed, and the proceeding is bilateral, not a unilateral tribunal." He looked at me. "That is what the communication will say," I added, "probably in more formal language." 2 minutes. The communications panel in the gallery chimed. The gray-scaled senior assessor moved to it, read something, and spoke to Ve-Loreth in primary speech. Ve-Loreth listened. He said something back, a single short response. The assessor's posture changed. the lower two arms dropping slightly, which I had learned was a Keth-Soraan sign of uncertainty, of a fixed position becoming unfixed. Valoreth looked at me. The communication says exactly what you said it would say. Yes, I said. You knew the content. I helped write it, I said. He was silent for a long moment. Above us, through the dome, the human fleet held its position. 27 vessels, the carriers, the destroyers, the escorts, each of them exactly where the formation required. None of them moving, none of them powering hardpoints, not one transmission of a targeting signal. Just there, patient, the way a storm waits. The time for asking, Valoreth said slowly, had already passed. Yes, I said. He looked at the dome for a long moment, then he looked at me. You were going to refuse regardless, he said. From the beginning, the questioning, the time, none of it was going to change your answer. No, I said. Then this proceeding needed to happen, I said, just not for the reason you thought. I set the empty water container on the desk. You needed to spend this time in this room. Your fleet needed to stay in this formation. Your communications needed to be tied to this proceeding. Your senior people needed to be here in this gallery. I looked at him. The arrival outside needed to be a surprise. A formation that had been here 12 days without resolution was more likely to react to a surprise event with the kind of hesitation that avoids an accident than a formation that had been on high alert for 3 days and was looking for something to shoot. He looked at me for a long time. 47 proceedings, he said. Yes, I said. Nothing like this. No, I said, probably not. 1 minute. Valoreth sat down. The posture wasn't the display posture, all 4 arms arranged with the deliberate formality of an Arbiter-Primus conducting a proceeding. It was just sitting down. His lower hands went to the desk, not flat in the formal gesture, just resting. He looked at the data slate with the acknowledgement document he had read to me. He looked at the dome. The joint review, he said. Yes. The Dominion would not be conceding fault. No, I said, neither would Earth. And the tribunal's sealed finding would be noted as disputed, I said. In the formal record, both parties' positions documented. The joint review would proceed from there. 30 seconds. The communications panel chimed again. The gray-scaled assessor read it and said something to Valoreth, short and quiet. Valoreth nodded once. He looked at me. The fleet is transmitting a second communication, he said. A direct channel request, to this ship, to me. Yes, I said. That would be the part where someone more senior than me explains the specifics. He looked at the dome. The 27 vessels held their position. The gas giant's banded ochre surface scrolled slowly through the lower half of the dome's view. The local star's light fell in its sharp-edged trapezoid on the pale stone desk. None of it had changed. All of it was different. Corporal Strand, Valoreth said. Yes. He was looking at the dome, not at me, at the ships visible in it. All 4 eyes, the full attention, aimed at the formation that had no opening in it. When they put the bag over your head, he said, for the shuttle ride up, did you know then? I thought about it honestly. I knew the plan, I said. I didn't know if it would work. Plans usually don't work exactly as planned. But you were willing, he said. Yes, I said. To sit in a room for 42 minutes and wait. I've been in this corridor for 7 months, I said. 42 minutes is nothing. 42 minutes is a weather event. I looked at the dome. You go out when it's over, that's all. He was quiet for a long time. Then he turned back to his desk and pressed a hand to the communications panel. He said in standard clearly, for the record, for the gallery, for whoever was on the direct channel, accept the communication. I stood up. The guards by the door looked at Valoreth. He made a small gesture with his upper left hand. They stepped back. Not releasing me, I was still in the detention strap, still technically in tribunal custody, but back. a gesture of procedural pause. I stood at the center of the room and looked up through the dome at the fleet outside, while Valorith began the channel. Above us, the 27 vessels held. None of them were going anywhere. None of them needed to. The storm was already present. The only question now was how long it took the room to agree that going back inside made more sense than staying out in it. It would take another 4 hours, as it turned out. 4 hours of direct channel between Valorith and the fleet's senior diplomat, while the 12 Keth-Soraan in the gallery observed, and I sat on the low bench and drank 2 more containers of water and waited, which I was good at, which all of us were good at, which was something that had never quite translated across species lines despite a decade of compact negotiations and joint exercises and shared patrol corridors. They kept expecting us to break. The answer, the one I could never quite make land in a briefing or a negotiation or a room like this one, was that breaking required the belief that the situation was unendurable. And we'd come from a place where the baseline was already high enough that most situations the galaxy had to offer didn't qualify. 11 days was not unendurable, 42 minutes was nothing. 7 months in a corridor, waiting for the thing to arrive, and then standing in a room and waiting for the thing you'd been waiting for to make itself felt, that was just a day's work. That was just the job. Valorith accepted the joint review proposal at the 4-hour mark. He signed the agreement himself, under tribunal seal, which gave it the compact certified weight his original document had been designed to carry. The 11 prisoners were released to compact processing the following morning. The 7th Expeditionary's contested space operations in the Thresh-Median corridor resumed under joint monitoring 62 days later. I was on a transit shuttle home before the ink was cold. The shuttle had a small viewport portside, and through it I watched the Keth-Soraan formation dissolving, the 12 vessels breaking their positions and moving back to standard patrol spacing. No longer a wall, just ships. Ships with crews that had been maintaining a formation posture for 12 days and were now, presumably, standing down to something more sustainable, running watch rotations at lower alert, eating their meals in the standard cycle rather than the short-interval combat readiness cycle. The human fleet was folding out on the other side, one group at a time, the fold distortions bright for a moment against the gas giant's surface and then gone, gone, gone. The carriers first, then the destroyers, then the escorts, disappearing in the order that made the most operational sense, largest and slowest first, smallest and fastest last, covering the fold-out as they went. The gas giant's banded surface remained through both of our viewport windows. Ours and theirs, the same planet, the same star's light on it. I had a ration block in my pocket that I'd been given when they processed me out of tribunal custody. The processing had been correct and professional, a Keth-Soraan administrative caste clerk handling the paperwork with the same four-armed careful precision that characterized everything the judiciary caste did, logging my release in the formal record, applying the compact certified stamps, returning the items they had cataloged as mine. The items they had cataloged as mine did not include the sleeve or the chrono. I kept those. The clerk either didn't notice or didn't feel it was worth noting. I ate the ration block looking at the viewport. It tasted like pressed grain and artificial sweetener and the inside of a processing unit, which is what it was. It was the best thing I'd eaten in 11 days. I thought about Valorith, his 47 proceedings. The quality of his attention, all 4 eyes, the feeling of being analyzed rather than seen. He wasn't wrong about much, about the composure being a sign that someone had concluded something, about the cost attached to waiting, about the leverage in the room being unevenly distributed. He had been accurate on almost every point. The one point he'd missed was the one that mattered. He had assessed the situation correctly without the information that changed the situation, and without that information, the correct assessment still led to the wrong conclusion. That's what classified means in the end. Not that the information is hidden. It's always findable, if you have the time and the access and the inclination, and the right asset in the right position at the right moment. It means that the people who need it most don't have it at the moment it matters. Valoreth had perfect situational awareness and no idea the fleet was coming. Those two things coexisted without contradiction, right up until the alarm tone sounded. After that, they didn't coexist anymore. The alliance of those two things, correct assessment plus wrong conclusion, was something I'd seen in enough engagements to have stopped being surprised by it. It was the thing that made intelligence work worth doing, and the thing that made it difficult. Most people, when they have all the information available to them, will process it correctly. The failure isn't usually analytical. The failure is that there's information they don't have, and they don't know they don't have it, and so they draw correct conclusions from an incomplete picture and act on those conclusions with full confidence. Valoreth had been confident throughout. He was still confident when he turned from the viewport and looked at me and said, "How long?" He'd been confident while looking at his ships. The confidence didn't break, it just recalibrated rapidly and completely when the picture acquired its missing piece. 47 proceedings. He'd be more careful about the quiet ones after this. I finished the ration block somewhere above the gas giant's equatorial band and put the wrapper in my pocket because there was nowhere to put it and I didn't want to leave it on the seat. I put my head back against the shuttle wall. The viewport was at my left shoulder, the planet visible below, and then not as the shuttle adjusted its angle, banking slightly into the course that would take us to the fleet tender. I had been wrong twice, that I knew of. Once about the weather, the storm seasons on Pella's 9 run long some years, and I had come out too early once at 16, and spent 4 hours in a rock shelter waiting for a lull that came eventually, cold and annoyed with myself, not afraid but aware of the specific texture of miscalculation. Once about a person, a commander I'd trusted with information I shouldn't have, early in my service, and the information had traveled further than I intended, and the consequence had been manageable but instructive. Both times, the particular texture, the half-second where the body had already committed and the mind was catching up. I hadn't felt it in the chamber. Not once. Not when he talked about the 11 prisoners, not when he showed me the formation in the viewport, not when he told me nothing was coming. Not when the alarm sounded and he turned to look at me with the full 4-eye attention and said, "How long?" 42 minutes is nothing. You go out when it's over, that's all. The shuttle docked with the fleet tender 2 hours later, and I was processed through debrief before I was processed through anything else, which is how it goes and how it should go. The debrief officer was a lieutenant commander I didn't know, younger than I'd expected, which was an artifact of the war running longer than the initial projections, and the promotions accelerating as a result, thorough and quick, which I appreciated. He had a data slate and a recording unit, and the particular focused attention of someone who has been told this is important information and is taking that seriously. He asked me everything I could remember about the tribunal gallery, the layout, the personnel, the communications panel position, the viewport angles, the alarm tone sequence, the time delay between the fold distortion signal and Valoreth's visual acquisition of the emerging fleet. I told him all of it. I have a good memory for rooms. I have a particularly good memory for rooms in which I have spent time watching myself breathe and counting minutes. When we were done, he thanked me and stood and then paused at the door and said, with the slightly awkward cadence of someone saying something they feel they should say but aren't sure how to say it. They were asking, when we first got the capture report, whether to change the timing, whether to push the fold in earlier. "Why didn't they?" I said. He looked at me for a moment. The operational assessment was that changing the timing would require communicating the change, and that any communication could be intercepted, and that the value of the surprise effect outweighed the risk to the asset. He paused. "The asset being you." "That's correct," I said. "It did." He nodded once, formally, and left. I sat in the debrief room for a moment after he was gone. The asset. I had been an asset in a plan I had partly designed and entirely executed, and the plan had worked, and now I was in a debrief room on a fleet tender in a corridor I'd been in for 7 months, and in a few hours I would be in a bunk. Fair enough. When we were done, I walked down the fleet tender's main corridor to the berthing area assigned to 7th Expeditionary Personnel, found the bunk with my name on it, and sat on the edge. The mattress was standard military, not soft, not hard, exactly what you'd expect from a fleet tender's berthing, the kind of mattress designed to be functional across a range of body types and sleeping positions and lengths of deployment. The bunk above mine was empty. There was a small viewport at the end of the room, circular, and through it the local star was visible, already moving out of central angle as the tender altered course toward the transit corridor home. I sat there for a while, not doing anything in particular, not debriefing internally, not reconstructing the chamber, not running through what I'd said and what he'd said, and what the implications were for the formal review process that would follow. Those thoughts would come later, and when they came I'd give them the attention they deserved. Right now I just sat. The storm was over. I was out. That was enough.